Why does Arena Breakout Infinite's loot feel so underwhelming compared to Tarkov's? For those of you who have seen my last few videos, you know that we've been having a lot of fun in Arena Breakout Infinite, and I think at this point I have enough information to talk about some of the more important things in our Arena Breakout Infinite versus Escape from Tarkov discussion, which I feel ABI needs to improve on. If you've played Tarkov and you start playing Arena Breakout Infinite, one of the first things you're going to notice after a handful of raids is that the loot value you're bringing out of raid is nowhere near what it is like in Escape from Tarkov. A couple of my favorite Tarkov creators hit the nail on the head here.
Putting kits together and how much they cost and how easy money is to get is so much worse than ABI. That's the one thing I hate so much about that game. Making money sucks.
The scaling, so it makes Arena Breakout like 3 times harder to farm money for equipment, if that makes sense.
So
the equipment is more expensive relative to the loot.
And this is pretty much how every former Tarkov player I've talked to or play with feels about this game. In Tarkov, every raid feels like it's a high-stakes treasure hunt because you just never know when you're going to find that item that completely outweighs your entire loadout in terms of value, or that last quest item you need to progress your task line. There's something to be said about just how immersive and detailed that system of Tarkov is in comparison to Arena Breakout Infinite. Each item has a purpose, whether it's selling, crafting, or completing quests, and that adds another layer of strategy to the game that players must make tough decisions about what to keep and what to leave behind. In ABI, this just is not the case, unfortunately. Please bear in mind that this is a beta, and to this point, the developers have been very receptive to community feedback, so I'm sure at least some of these things will change. But let's talk a little bit more about what makes ABI's loot system a little frustrating. If we just look at the mathematics, it's easy to see where the frustration stems from. On average, for a class 4 kit and a mid-tier weapon in Escape from Tarkov, you are typically going to spend somewhere between 325 to 400,000 rubles, and it's not really all that difficult to extract with close to or more than what your loadout's value is, even if you don't engage in PvP on most maps. Of course, figures are going to vary, but this is the general consensus among the Tarkov community. So keeping that in mind, even if we never have lucky raids, PvP, or really put any strategy into what we're bringing into the raids, as long as we're getting out 51% of the time, we're making money. This doesn't even take into account our scav runs, which are also a massive income supplement if they're utilized. Now, if we take a look at the average cost for a similar kit in Arena Breakout Infinite, it's going to be around 130 to 150,000 K, depending on your preferences. When we start analyzing the amount of loot we are removing from the raid without PvP, the problem becomes fairly obvious. In normal mode on the base map farm, it appears to be between 30 to 40k on average in value. That's not even a third of your loadout's value, so you can see why it might be hard to make any money if you're not running budget kits. You're probably saying, well, lockdown mode is a lot better. And to a degree, that's true. In lockdown, you do see extra containers, you see extra loose loot, and as far as I can tell, the key locked rooms are much better. But the overall value in our runs without PvP at most doubled, and at worst stayed the same for some members of our group. And even when the non-player loot value doubles, you're still only pulling out 2/3 of your kit value. Now, here's the part where you're probably expecting some data on the Forbidden Zone, but that's my next issue with the game. I can't even play that mode because it's time locked and only opens between 5 a.m. and noon my time. So essentially, if you're in the US and you have a job, you can only play this mode on the weekend, and on a very limited basis at that if you're not up at the crack of dawn. And for all I know, this mode completely fixes all of the loot issues, and I just don't know. For that reason, I'm of the opinion that if you're going to time lock a zone, you need to do it by region or find some other mechanic to make it realistically accessible for normal people, especially when you're selling your game as a more accessible version of a hardcore game. But to backtrack to the main issue, if we apply the logic we used previously, we would need an extract rate of 66% or higher to maintain positive cash flow in lockdown mode and a whopping 75% in normal mode without supplementing that income using the covert ops or scav mode. That's kind of insane. Granted, this is assuming that you either never win in PvP or you don't PvP at all, but I think you get what I'm getting at. Now, this is a complicated problem with a lot of different variables, and this is a very simple way of looking at it. Yes, this method is flawed, and that fact is not lost on me. For clarity, I'm not saying there are no ways to make money, I'm simply stating that the average player is going to struggle mightily in this kind of economy, especially if they have no extraction shooter experience. It seems to me that with the efforts this game has made to do many of the things that Tarkov does but better, it would make a lot more sense if they adjusted the economy to emulate one of, if not the most exciting mechanic in Escape from Tarkov. Again, it's beta and there's a lot going on behind the scenes, I'm sure, but this is, in my opinion, one of the most important issues they need to address currently. It is a little terrifying to think that this could be by design, because when you do, you have to consider all of the potential reasons the developer would want it this way. The scariest one of those being a plan for the eventual monetization of gear purchases, which already exists in the mobile version. To this point, the only planned monetization model I have heard about is the planned monthly subscription fee for the secure container and the inventory space, but we have to keep in mind that ultimately the developer's job is to make their game profitable. But for now, I'm going to assume that the reason the economy is the way it is due to the mobile version being pay to win, and that their intentions are to avoid using that in the PC version since it would likely result in a massive negative response. So it's going to take them some time to adjust the economy. Let's move on to the last issue I have with ABI, which I would consider major: the lack of small group or solo efficacy and forced group mechanics. We don't have to spend a lot of time talking about why it is a universally accepted fact that pickup groups can be bad. Seemingly every other lobby has that one guy. You know the one I'm talking about. The one that grenades his teammates at the fob in Gray Zone, or the guy in Helldivers who's killing teammates to pick up their samples because he was too much of a dumbass to realize they were shared loot. Well, now imagine that this game essentially forces you to choose between grouping with that guy or running without him, and drastically reducing your chances of survival. Surely, when you down a player, that guy is going to leave all that valuable stuff since it's your kill, right? And he's definitely not slipping into that room you just unlocked and hitting the safe before you, right? You see where I'm going with this. There are enough reasons in PvE settings for me to dislike pickup groups in general, but in those settings you don't have to worry about them taking the most valuable loot in the game and an awful economy from you, on top of all the other things that they can do to make your raid miserable, like calling you a blue-eared monkey or talking about how hairy their butthole is. In my opinion, it makes zero sense to force people to group with strangers in any looter shooter at all. The potential to frustrate your player base is just too high. If you've played Tarkov and not ABI, you're probably wondering, well, why don't you just solo? The problem is, in ABI, even a pickup group that's never played together before can be far more cohesive than a group in Tarkov due to the quality of life features that ABI has. In Tarkov, you have a far greater chance of survival without numerical superiority if you're the better players, because the teammates don't always know who is who or who is where, whereas in ABI everyone knows due to the interface telling you who and where your teammates are. This, coupled with squad-only VoIP, map indicators, and far fewer dark corners or cover to ambush from, increases the effectiveness of numerical superiority, so the only players you're going to catch soloing are typically streamers or very good players in general, and even they can struggle at times. The most common sense solution to this problem is to create either a duo or solo queue, or both, I would assume, and really hope that this is in the works, because most of the players I play with are only playing if we have a 4-stack, and they're completely avoiding the game if we don't have a pre-made group going. So, there you have it. Arena Breakout Infinite has a lot going for it, but the loot system definitely needs some work to match the excitement and immersion from Escape from Tarkov. With a few adjustments, I'm pretty sure ABI can provide a more balanced and rewarding loot experience and be more accommodating to players who don't have 3 friends sitting on standby anytime they want to play the game. Hopefully we'll see some of these issues addressed in future updates, and until then, keep those extraction percentages up, and hey, if you've got any thoughts or suggestions on how Arena Breakout Infinite could improve its loot system, drop them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more gaming insight. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.